There are names that history remembers with fear. Medusa is one of them. Speak her name, and the mind conjures the same dreadful image, a woman crowned with living serpents, whose gaze turned flesh to stone. A monster, a curse, a nightmare whispered through generations whenever darkness crept beneath the door. That is the story the world chose to remember. But history has always belonged to those who survived long enough to tell it. The fallen are rarely given that privilege. So what if the tale you have heard all your life was never the whole truth? What if the monster was never the villain? What if the true horror was not born in Medusa, but in the hearts of the gods themselves? Long before her name became a warning, Medusa was simply a young woman, and a woman whose beauty was spoken of the way men speak of things that frighten them. Poets abandoned their verses halfway, unable to find words that would not diminish her. Sculptors carved her likeness into marble and then covered their work, unsatisfied.
The light returns to us. At last, I see it.
Yet beauty, in the world of gods and mortals, has always been both a blessing and a sentence waiting to be carried out. Within the sacred temple of Athena, goddess of wisdom, Medusa lived a quiet life of devotion. Day after day, she walked beneath towering columns of pure white marble, tending the sanctuary with gentle hands and an untroubled heart. She trimmed the lamps before dusk. She swept the same stones until they held the warmth of her palms. The temple was more than stone and incense. It was a promise, a place where mortal fears were meant to end at the threshold. Or so she believed. Then came the day the sea itself seemed to hold its breath. Poseidon, merciless lord of seas and storms, entered the temple not as a guest, but as a storm. Among the gods, desire itself was law. His arrogant gaze settled upon Medusa. And in that single moment, the life she had known slipped beyond her reach. The innocent prayers that once echoed between the marble columns fell silent. The ancient peace of that holy place was shattered by the scent of raging waves. Medusa's desperate cries rose toward the heavens and struck the cold heart of the stone walls, falling back one by one, unanswered. What happened next is the part the legends hurry past. Because the crime was only the beginning. What followed was the judgment, and the judgment is where the truth of this story lives. When the storm withdrew and the sea returned to its silence, Medusa was left alone on the floor of a temple that no longer felt like a sanctuary. She did not run. She did not hide. She turned to Athena. Understand what that means. This was not a stranger she appealed to. This was the goddess she had served since childhood, whose lamps she had filled, whose floor she had swept, whose name she had spoken every morning before the sun rose. Goddess of wisdom, goddess of war, goddess of justice. Medusa knelt beneath that towering statue and asked for nothing but recognition. And Athena came. Her fury was real. It was vast. It filled the temple until the marble seemed to strain against it. But listen carefully to what that fury was for. Athena did not burn because a young woman had been broken. She burned because her temple had been defiled, her name dishonored, her sacred ground made unclean by another god's arrogance. The rage was for the stone, not for the girl weeping upon it. And the one who had committed the crime was Poseidon, brother of Zeus, lord of every sea that touched every shore, one of the mightiest beings in all creation. Athena was wise. Wisdom was her domain, her gift, the very thing mortals prayed to her for, and so she understood, with perfect clarity, exactly what it would cost her to name the guilty. Some enemies are simply too powerful to condemn. There is a long silence in this part of the story, and I want you to sit inside it. A goddess looking down, a young woman looking up, both of them knowing what had happened, only one of them able to speak it aloud. Medusa did not ask for vengeance. She did not demand that Poseidon be punished. The stories do not record her words, but they record what she came for, and it was the smallest thing a person can ask, to be believed. She was not believed, she was blamed. Because when justice cannot reach the powerful, it does not simply stop. It turns. It looks for a target it can actually strike. It searches for an easier victim. That night, it found Medusa. She stood before the goddess not as a criminal, but as a broken soul, begging for compassion. None was given. That night, not a single star shone in the sky. Not one temple lamp gave comfort to the soul. In the freezing darkness, only two sounds remained: the hissing of serpents and the cry of a breaking heart. Because that night, no monster descended from the heavens, as the stories claim. That night, the story of an innocent human being was torn apart by the hands of gods and twisted into a dark legend. In a single night, those silken locks that fairy tales envied became a crown of cursed serpents. Those soft eyes, once filled with kindness, became instruments of death. From that day forward, every living soul that met her gaze was condemned to cold marble before it could draw another breath. Not because Medusa wished for blood, but because the curse granted no choice. And here is the cruelty inside the cruelty. Athena did not take her life. She took everything that made a life worth having, and then left her alive to notice. There was no embrace waiting for her, no comfort, no hand that could hold her own without turning to stone.
Why has this curse befallen me?
Banished from every city, hunted by every hero, Medusa disappeared into a desolate land where even the wind seemed reluctant to wander. Caves became her shelter. Shadows became her companions. Try to imagine the shape of those years.
The stone remembers.
She could not look at a bird without ending it. She could not sit beside a stream and watch a deer come down to drink. Every creature that wandered into her sight became a monument to a crime she never chose to commit. And those monuments accumulated around her cave, year after year, until she lived inside a garden of the dead. There were men among them. Some had come hunting glory. Some had simply lost their way. She could not tell them apart anymore, and it no longer mattered. The outcome was always the same, and the fault was always assigned to her. She learned to keep her eyes on the ground. She learned to speak to no one, because there was no one. And somewhere in those long years, she must have understood that even if the world discovered the truth tomorrow, nothing could be undone. The curse did not lift for innocence. It only lifted for death. And no one ever came searching for the woman she had once been. They came only for the monster the stories had created.
I am cursed to be feared and alone. Do not look away.
Then, one quiet dawn, another name entered the legend. Perseus, the favored son of destiny. Armed by the gods, guided by the gods, protected by the gods. He crossed mountains, seas, and kingdoms, not to understand Medusa, but to kill her. Using his polished shield as a mirror, he stepped silently into the darkness where she slept. No glorious battle followed, no clash of swords, only the whisper of a blade and silence. Across Olympus, cries of triumph echoed. Songs were sung of Perseus. Statues were raised in his honor. History remembered him as a hero, the man who slew the monster, never the man who killed a sleeping woman the gods had already destroyed once before. And yet, when the final tear slid from the eyes of that severed head and fell upon the earth, the heavens answered with thunder, as though Olympus itself could no longer bear its silence. Even the sky knew. History rarely asks who was forced to become the monster before it crowns someone else the savior. Because the story of Medusa is not the story of a monster. It is the story of gods spoiled by power, of minds blinded by vengeance, of a woman who asked to be believed and was punished for asking. Every age since has produced its own Medusa. Every age has found it easier to condemn the one who cannot strike back than to name the one who can. So tell me, when you hear the name Medusa, what do you see? A creature of hatred? Or a young woman whose voice was buried beneath centuries of fear? The first, and perhaps the greatest, victim of a story she was never allowed to tell. The vault has closed its doors. But somewhere, beneath the silent marble of Athena's forgotten temple, the truth is still waiting to be heard.